You know, prior to this, I'd only seen the original movie and one of the later entries, but now I've seen this one too. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel and another installment in my Texas Chainsaw Massacre review series, where I go through all the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies in the lead up to the new film. And today we're talking about the first sequel, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Before we begin, let me know in the comments what your thoughts on this movie were, if you already saw it or if you were planning on seeing it, and make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these reviews, as it helps me out immensely by getting my content out there. And if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with reviews of new releases, older films, hidden gems, and so much more on a near daily basis. But let's not waste any more time and let's talk about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. This stars Caroline Williams as Stretch, a radio host who's victimized by the cannibal family as a former Texas Marshal, played by Dennis Hopper, hunts them down. So as I've done previously with all my other retro reviews, this will go into spoiler territory. So if you haven't seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 and you wish to know nothing, this is your spoiler warning. Go watch the movie, then come back to this. But now that that's out of the way, here we go. Released 12 years after the original, this is the only other film in this franchise directed by Tobe Hooper, who, interestingly enough, was only going to return as a producer, but couldn't find anyone to helm the film. And this marks the starkest departure of all the films in this franchise, as this is really the only one that's a dark comedy. It's kind of something similar to what the Evil Dead franchise did, where the first films played as a straightforward horror movie, while its next two installments were played as over-the-top horror comedies. Now, what's interesting is, Hooper claims that there actually was a lot of darkly comedic elements in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre as well, and people simply missed it. Well, I guess I'm one of those people. While there are some over-the-top moments that do get the occasional chuckle in that movie, the overall tone of that film was, to me, clearly grimy, dirty, and completely serious. What he saw, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe I'm just missing something, though I'm not going to get into a debate about that right now. But make no mistake about this film, this is clearly meant to be much more comedic in nature, and it's made especially apparent by one of the posters used to advertise the film, where the Sawyer family poses in the style of The Breakfast Club, which is of course meant to evoke laughter. And the result was a bit mixed, at least at the time. While the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre polarized viewers when it was first released, reception towards this was even more polarizing, with those thrown off by the switch in tone as well as its pacing. It has since gained a cult following, but I'd say, unlike the Evil Dead 2 or Army of Darkness, both of which were just as beloved by fans as the first Evil Dead, this doesn't have the same level of revere as the original movie. And while I fall on the side of liking this one, I do see where people are coming from, because the movie is completely out there. It's not one of the most inaccessible movies to date, but the characters are considerably more over the top and absolutely bizarre, including Leatherface himself, who goes from being this menacing, hulking presence to just being more of a bumbling grunt. Now, while for me personally, Leatherface isn't my favorite of the horror movie villains, so I don't care so much about this shift in characterization, I can see how some people who are big fans of the character might not be on board with the way he's portrayed here. While it's consistent with the fact that, at the end of the day, he is essentially a pawn for the more calculating members of the Sawyer family, this still feels a bit more thankless than a number of his other portrayals, and is mostly played for laughs. I like the style, and he does get a few solid moments, in particular the splatter-humor-filled opening sequence, but I mean, I still wouldn't call this the most memorable portrayal of the character. Our two main villains this time around are actually Jim Cito, returning from the first film as the head of the Sawyer family, now given a name, Drayton Sawyer, after previously just being known as the Cook, and we also get, which was unknown to me until recently, probably the most memorable villain in the Texas Chainsaw franchise after Leatherface, that being Bill Moseley as Leatherface's brother, Chop Top. This is the only appearance in the movies by this character, and it's kind of a shame we didn't get a series of spin-off films with him returning or anything, even if it wasn't until much later on when this movie caught on with more people, because he is by far the best part about this movie. He's certainly out there with the way he screams and yells and says all these silly one-liners, but he doesn't just say, make a simple quip and he moves on, nor do we just get like a quick evil laugh from him whenever he shows up. He goes on, acting as the main source of comedy throughout the film. Shots will sometimes linger on him as Moseley just rants and raves and says all these ridiculous things, and no matter what else you think of the rest of the movie, you gotta give the guy a lot of credit for just how committed he is to being just absolutely weird. Now, I don't think every attempt at comedy necessarily works, but he's certainly memorable. And to go off that point even further, regarding the film's tone and its pacing, I can see where people might be mixed on it. Now, I like the approach taken by the film. I like when movies try to have some fun, and that's certainly the tone this goes for. I wouldn't say everything it tried landed though, which I think adds to the polarizing reception. Like I said, there's a lot of screaming and yelling and deranged kookiness by pretty much everyone. Even if they're a character not necessarily played for laughs themselves, they will partake in a lot of said screaming and yelling. I'd say especially once the Sawyers confront Stretch and the film pivots to a lot of her versus them, that's where we'll see this the most. We'll have scenes that go on sometimes for quite a while where it's Chop Top or Drayton taunting Stretch and she's doing nothing but screaming at the top of her lungs and running away, sometimes with not much else to do. And I wish I could say I was exaggerating when I say that it goes on for a while. Even I thought I was going to land on the side of not liking this movie for a bit, as I had to get used to this. And it's supposed to be played in this ridiculous angle. Like, this film has another dinner scene, and whereas that was meant to be one of the most frightening moments of the first film, it's played here for much more zaniness, but I just don't think it worked all the time. I do like Caroline Williams as Stretch. I think, like the actress playing our antagonist, she's very committed. She has a much more likable personality than the protagonist from the first film, which I will say is one of the biggest improvements this makes over the first film. But the constant back and forth taunting and screaming can hit a point of being a little obnoxious at times, just for how long it can go on at times. And while I think this isn't meant to be as much of an exercise in tension as the first movie, it can sometimes break whatever tension there is, so I can see this as making or breaking the viewers. But like I said, at least the protagonists here have certainly much more of a likable personality than the protagonists of the first movie, who I felt were nothing more than bodies for the Sawyers to chase and or dispose of. Here, you come around to enjoying them more, even if I felt they could be boxed in with what they were given to do at times, which is the one trade-off. And that brings us to our other protagonist, Lefty, played by Dennis Hopper, which marks a departure from the cast of the first film, where everyone was played by a relatively unknown actor. Obviously, Dennis Hopper is a big name, and this was already well into his career, so you have someone established in one of the primary roles. Now, while the Sawyers are taunting and chasing Stretch, Lefty, who's this former marshal, is chasing after them, with this having been a personal vendetta of his for years, because it's revealed that he's actually the uncle of Sally and Franklin from the first movie. And even though Sally survived the first film, it's revealed she's been in a catatonic state since those events, so we don't see her here. But Lefty's been out for revenge ever since. Now, I like certain aspects of what they did with this character and was a little lukewarm towards other things they did with him. Now, I will say, Dennis Hopper is perfect for a movie like this. It's actually kind of a shame he didn't do more comedies in general, as he's played his fair share of over-the-top figures, but usually for serious roles, most notably in Blue Velvet. But here he gets to play a little bit into that manic, almost ridiculous personality he can be so good at playing. But it's not really till the second half of the film. For the first half, his role felt a little more thankless. He's constantly seen as one step behind the Sawyers, he'll interact with Stretch or another character, he'll say how personal this is for him, and then he'll disappear for a bit. Not exactly the best use of Dennis Hopper, if you ask me. I wouldn't say he was properly utilized until the final act, where he comes in to save Stretch, and he starts wielding a chainsaw himself, duking it out with the Sawyers, and taking part in a bunch of that manic, over-the-top screaming and yelling. And once we get into that final act, I think that's where this movie really shines, and was what really solidified this for me as a solid, fun experience. It goes all out on its ridiculous splatter humor, you'll have a lot of fast-paced chase sequences, and totally bonkers confrontations among all the characters. It allows Mosley and even Jim Cito as Drayton to really go all out in their manic kookiness, and the same goes for Dennis Hopper. And it was just a good bit of fun that had me grinning from ear to ear. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 won't be for everyone. For those who prefer a more serious Leatherface and the griminess of Hooper's original movie, they'll be disappointed by the absolute gonzo, over-the-top approach taken here. And while not every attempt at comedy lands, and there are some pacing issues, I still thought this was an enjoyably fun watch. Between its splatter humor, its total commitment to being absolutely weird and out there, as well as some fun performances, especially by Bill Moseley in particular, this is a pleasantly surprising entry in this franchise. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 gets a 7 out of 10. Fun movie. I would get where people are coming from if they say they don't like this one, if they prefer just a completely straightforward, serious Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I enjoyed it. So stay tuned, as up next will be my review of Leatherface, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. And in the meantime, let me know, did you see The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Is this one of your favorite of the sequels? Do you not like this one so much? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and share it. And for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching, everyone, and keep having fun with film.